is it possible in that same regard that you're speaking of transmission or Shaktipat is never given, it's always stolen, that the responsibility is never given, always taken? Can you speak a little bit about maybe the correlation between those two? I'm making connections sort of as I'm speaking, and I am so appreciative of the dialogue, really. And I personally have been in a little bit of a maybe not little, an extended quandary about the teaching, about to teach or not to teach, and the guru giving permission and not, and just the whole kind of mind confusion around all of it. So whatever you can offer on that, I would really appreciate it.
It's a very rich topic. And there are several, and I can sense there are several threads, there are several questions. And to the first part on taking stand, right? The responsibility is never given, it is always taken, right? Versus it's not given, it is stolen, right? If we are to look at it from the perspective of how often in this enterprise, those who assume roles of spiritual seekers place responsibility for their evolution or squarely on the shoulders of those that they choose to be their guides. This is a stuff of legend. It's proverbial. So this is a reminder, a very important reminder, that realization cannot be conferred. And it doesn't matter if we read about it somewhere in books. And in fact, whenever we read something like that, we need to question really the premises why that has been said. Why would someone say that the fact that someone came in the presence of so-and-so immediately or after a period of time set someone free? At best, it can create a certain humility in someone's life, and certainly if there is a lot of, if that sense of self is not fully developed, if that ahamkara, if that individuality is not fully ripe, then for that person it might even be beneficial to have that kind of sense of dependency, because hopefully it will contribute to a self-discipline. But at worst, it can perpetuate any real responsibility for one's affairs. And that includes, of course, to recognize one's sovereignty. One's sovereignty. To recognize that self-realization is essentially never between two people. Never was and never will be. It's an existential affair. The guru acts as a principle. With that being said, if we turn it into a dry affair, then we of course will also miss the whole point. And it is not at all a secret that those who have been the most courageous and the most audacious in essentially claiming their realizations would always deny that and always attribute that to their gurus. It's an interesting phenomenon, especially observable in Eastern spirituality, more so in Eastern spirituality. It's almost like maybe paying tribute to a tradition. Maybe it's a tradition in its own right. Everything is given to the grace that one speaks of as being received from the Guru. And yet, it was a pure act of being able to claim it as one's own. That's what it means. That's why, among many extraordinary sayings by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, that one is one of my favorite. Responsibility is never given, it is always taken. Another one that I always like to cite is, at all times we shall be ready to sacrifice what we are to what we can become. More or less, I'm paraphrasing, you can tweak it if you have this written somewhere, but that's what it really stands for. But your question also has some other very important, very valid areas with regard to that relationship itself, right? With regard to that, what was in the second part of what you spoke. So if we fully acknowledge that responsibility essentially is solely on the part of the one who assumes the role of a student, a disciple, or anything, and has always been, traditionally speaking, that how has always been. It's in a way, yes, there is even speaking of that, of all this kind of what goes into that relationship, that testing, one should test the guru and the guru should test the disciple, and and it's like various tests on both parts. Then there have to be acceptance on the part of the teacher to accept the disciple, and likewise there has to be also this acceptance at the other end. But if we really cut it to the chase, the responsibility always lays with the one who assumes that role. You see, this will explain why some gurus, historical figures, took very indifferent stand from start. They were never fused by anything, never fused by how many they were followed or by how few they were followed by. They never even wanted to offer that kind of relationship. The so much spoken of today Ramana Maharshi in these days was such sage. He was never fused and phased off by anyone who followed him and who completely worshipped him. Even the title Ramana Maharshi, or the title of Maharshi, that he has received from Ganapati Muni, right? Who declared and proclaimed him to be the incarnation of essentially incarnation of a very, very important sage who was the incarnation of Shiva himself, but he comes in various forms. And he was the third incarnation. And he called him Maharshi for that. Ramana Maharshi never confirmed that Ganapati Muni was self-realized. He always considered him to be he's not fully done. No one was ever fully done to his standard. The only two beings that were fully done was his mother and the cow. Yes, it's serious. His mother and the cow that he liked among the herds of cows, he said, these are the only two that I can reassure you that they were realized. Other teachers are known for very, very involved connections and attitudes. But what your question brings here is there is a lot of aspects that where the ethics are involved as well. And one of the ethics here is that if we place responsibility for our evolution in the hands of the Guru, then soon as we have exhausted our own powers and exhausted our own resolve, the first thing we will likely to do is to place that responsibility, now with the tug of disappointment and lack of fulfillment, squarely on Guru's forehead. Because that was from the start. If I came to the Guru and he's the master and I surrender, do whatever you want, then that obviously presupposes that if it doesn't work, that means, well, I gave my responsibility, but that responsibility was not, I'm not enlightened. Who is to blame? I cannot be blamed, I surrendered. You see? This is why the exchanges we had the other night, that was in mind. That was clearly in mind. You see? So this is to that connection between the two sayings that you brought up, that you have heard, that it's not a secret among the people who are desirous of liberation. Liberation can only be to those who are courageous enough to claim it for themselves. Yes, traditionally there is also a Guru who confirms that. One way or the other, that confirmation comes. And this is also paying respect to the tradition. For example, one can completely be in utter there's nothing that one is not. There is just clarity, because when Satchitananda shines forth, it shines forth nothing other than one's own self. And when that is realized, that one is not lit by the light of the sun, but the sun is lit by one's own light. When one knows that, what confirmation is needed? And yet even then, traditionally, this is referred, and Guru nods. Oh, great, and let's have some tea, hey man, it's like, oh hey woman, There is this acknowledgement, indeed, that it is so. That's how it always was. That's how it is always is. But without that courage, it will always be in the hands of someone else. And we have people moving from teachers to teachers. They try many different teachers because they think that, that teacher failed. No one thinks that they have failed. It's like I yet to come across, it's like there is a whole army of failed teachers out there. But what essentially fails here is the courage to take stand. It's one of the first things I spoke to when I begin speaking. It's like you have to be able to stand as consciousness. You will fail. You will fall many times over. I've actually discovered quite late the teaching of Chogyam Trungpa. Quite late. In fact, I never heard of him for some reason. Just passed me by, but doesn't matter. Kind of like delving into I find a lot of allusions to what a profound teacher he was. Yes, he's a controversial. Yes, he's called rascal. Yes, he's a crazy wisdom kind. Yes, there's a controversies lingering behind, and his name is also belongs to that, camp. But there's a lot in his teaching that I resonate with, and whatever I read is like I could have said that. I totally subscribe to that. He gave analogy to walking into the ocean, where before you reach the depth, it's quite shallow and wavy. Not wavy, there are waves. And you begin your walk, and first you walk in, and the break is not that strong. But as you walk deeper, the wave comes and knocks you down, tumbles you. If you allow that to happen, you'll be out. And you get up and you carry on walking. And then another wave will come, and for sure it will tumble you down, knock you off, and maybe even throw you back on the shore again. But your job is to get up and keep walking until one day, erected up and with resolute, unwavering, as the Gita says, you will pass these crushing waves of the shore, and the ocean is yours to claim. But that claiming of the ocean will also be claiming of yourself. Because the two cannot exist. And this is where all perennial traditions agree. And that's what we don't want to hear, because we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to somehow enter the kingdom of heaven intact. So there's nothing wrong in being swept by these waves, fallen. As long as there is this inner intention set, and a firm one, doesn't matter how many times I will fall. For each time I will fall, I will rise. That's all there is. That's what it means to stand as consciousness. Doesn't matter how many times I fail. Each time I fail, I'll succeed. And then success is claimed. No way it is not claimed, because you are nothing other than that. And it happens within your consciousness. There's no one else, no other agent. Everything else is this amazing, amazing play of consciousness. The only role, really, the principle, that guru principle here, is that final area of interactions. If the guru is the real deal, then that would constantly be referred back. The true guru will never fail the disciple. Even if the disciple leaves the guru never failed the disciple, because he doesn't know how to fail. He only shined and reflected back to what needed to be shined. I was unable to take it. That's another story. What makes me think that elsewhere I will be able to take it? Some gurus more sweet-spoken, sweet-tongued, others sharp, and everything in between. Some are all that. All that. Our preferences, of course, will be for that which is gentler. Isn't that? It's normal. But I also give examples, forgive me for this, right? When you go to the surgeon, if there is some very precise surgery to be performed, would you go to the decisive surgeon who knows how to handle, how to cut, how to open, so that also to work on? Or you go to the softy, because he cuts you softly. And it's never because there's no care. No, the care is essentially never setting or settling for second best. It's never to, okay, I know it's painful. Truth is always painful, so let me not give you truth. Have half truth. Have something that is a substitute. That it will keep you going. That is cruel. That's cruelty. It's unfair even. It's better to be a silent sage, a muni. And there's so many, unfortunately, perceptors who simply perpetuate, contribute even, build up more. They contribute to that what needs to be dismantled. In the final analysis, would have to be dismantled. So therefore, other than that, there's no need for the guru. No need for the guru. And with all that being said, this mysterious cannot be scrutinized. It cannot be understood intellectually. And I am living proof, an example of that, because I denied that with all my force. And yet it succumbed me completely, claimed. That what claimed me was nothing other than love. But it, of course, at the time it was not known. Because that merging and that force simply chose to recognize in Maharishi Mahesh Yogi as a living embodiment of love that he indeed was. Living embodiment of love. We are fortunate to be born in the epoch and time that the force, such pure and great as he, walked the earth. I recognize that, how fortunate how I remember I was simply, when I wanted to meet him physically, I recognized that was simply an individual desire. But when I realized that I'm fortunate to be alive at the time when he is alive, I was happy as a kid who found his father. And still am. So therefore, don't ask me for explanations. I don't know reasonable and logical explanations for that relationship. Because I'm biased. So be smart and trust your intuition. Only intuition. Your heart will guide you, nothing else. Heart cannot lie. It has no agendas.